Now, a little known chapter of Clare's history has been brought to light in a new book and lecture. Rita McCarthy, the Clare-based social historian, has spent years researching the County Clare Nursery, a mother and baby home that operated from 1922 to 32 in Kilrush. And her book, Forgotten Lives, uncovers the experiences of unmarried mothers and their children in the early years of the Irish Free State. And Rita joins us now. Rita, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan.
Thank you very much for being with us and lucky enough to have a copy of your book. Can you tell listeners a little bit more about Forgotten Lives, why this was a book that you wanted to write?
Yeah, I suppose I came across the story by accident a good number of years ago when I was researching local government in County Clare after the War of Independence, because it's always interested me what happens after the war and what happens to ordinary people, and particularly vulnerable people whose lives are often very negatively impacted. And in my research, I came across this new system that had been set up all over the country to replace the workhouses. And in County Clare, that involves setting up the county home and also the county nursery. And County Clare was quite unique in that it set up the county nursery as kind of a secular institution, which, although there were nuns working there, they had been in the workhouse and they moved on to they were still in the workhouse because the old workhouse building was used. But it was secular. It was run by the local government with strong oversight from the Department of Local Government and Public Health. And I think that just fascinated me that had happened. I had been aware of Tuam and Bessborough, not so much, but Bessborough in particular, I had been aware of. And all those stories came out then later as I was researching. But it was significantly different in that it was run by the local authority with nuns working there, but also lay staff.
Okay, and given that difference, when you mentioned Tuam and Bessborough, people obviously will be so familiar with some of the awful stories they heard from both those institutions. Because this was run by the local authority, did that mean women there had a different experience, or was it any less harrowing, any less difficult, or was it similar?
It was similar, and possibly, considering the dilapidated state of the building they were put into. Certainly Bessborough was a relatively new building. The dilapidated and appalling state of the building, it was worse. And certainly the outcome for the babies born there was equally bad, if not worse. Over the 10-year period, 248 babies died in the institution, and that pretty much matches and even outdoes some of the death rates in the other institutions.
My God, that's such a huge number for just 10 years, isn't it?
That was the number, yeah. And I went through the death records several times, and if that was the number that we came up with. Yeah, it was an appalling death rate, and the reasons for the death rate are well outlined in the book. Really, there were the poor conditions, no running water, no sanitary conditions, not proper food. The kitchen that they were using for the nursery and in the workhouse was not in the workhouse. Even though it was a huge building, it was in the hospital across the road. So they couldn't even prepare hot food. The rations was overseen by the department. So exactly the same as it had been in the workhouse days, they were given rations, and the rations were not enough. So the mothers who were there to breastfeed their children couldn't give them the nourishment that they needed. So the children, the majority died from two causes. One was a failure to thrive, and the other, which would be related to not getting the nourishment that they needed, and the other was given as marasmus, which is starvation, basically. So these children weren't able to survive. Huge numbers of them died.
Oh God, yeah. Is it any wonder what they did when you explain the kind of situation there? Can you talk to us a bit, Rita, about the work that you had to do to put this book together? I know you used a mix of sources, oral interviews, council minutes, newspaper reports. Did you face any particular challenges in trying to piece together this history, and were there any findings that particularly shocked you or moved you?
Oh, the baby's deaths moved me. Also, the overall care, I think, that was given. I mean, I wrote about the women. I mean, there were no women alive when I did my work. Of course, they were long gone. But reading between the lines, reading the minutes, reading the newspaper reports, which were absolutely brilliant, basically, to have them, because reporters sat in endless meetings and made verbatim notes, and often there were far more in the newspaper reports than there were in the minutes. Reading between the lines, the women, although there was no complaints about cruelty because they weren't there to do that, you could see that there was no love, no care, no compassion. These were fallen women, and they were treated as such. The children, there is evidence that they brought in night nurses to care for the children, but they were bringing them into a building that was not fit for purpose. And if you read the newspaper reports as well, you have county councillors making incredibly disparaging remarks about these women who were in these institutions and about the children even. And not just them, even government sources. These were considered to be and I use one chapter, I call it Children of a Lesser God. That's the chapter I write about the child babies. And it really is, that was the shock for me, I think. So little value was put on the lives of what turned out to be very often wonderful people who made great lives for themselves against all the odds and with no help whatsoever.
It's yet another example of, along with Tuam and Bessborough, of how Ireland in the early and Free State period, and perhaps even longer, Rita, really, and when I think regarding the treatment of vulnerable women and children, but perhaps broadening that out into women in general, it was just no country for women.
No, and it wasn't, and that's another thing that in the late 40s and really all the way through, women left, and they were left significantly more women left than men, and they immigrated, particularly to places like Manchester, London, Leeds, and all of those, because they could have a better life there. There was a health service coming on board, so their healthcare was going to be better looked after. They found employment in that health service. And there was at the time, there was reports done. There was things like the Carrigan report done. There was also reports on immigration where again the finger was pointed at women, that they were abandoning the country, and who was going to have these babies, and but they still didn't seem to connect the dots that for people to stay and live in the country, for women in particular, they needed care, and that was not there for them. It was no country for women, definitely.
The book was published last year. I just wonder what kind of reaction it has been garnering, and maybe you might talk to us a little bit about the talk you'll be giving on Monday for the North Clare Historical Society, both the talk and the book, what they're doing in terms of highlighting this story that needs more light to be put on it.
Yeah, the talk that I'm going to do on Monday, it is going to cover, the book and writing the book, and also I'm going to talk a bit about, that what I try to do, and I've done talks in different areas, is bring it to that area and find instances that relate to that area, and I was given a story by a survivor's by the daughter of a survivor, a man who immigrated to America, and also by a man who lives still lives in Clare, and whose mother was born in the county nursery, and he relates to that particular area as well. So I'm going to talk about those particular stories, but you could pick any parish in the county, and I could tell you that there is a story attached to it, and many of them probably. People have contacted me since the book went out, and some, very sad stories. And the survivor stories that I put at the end, there were 3 people. One who was born there, who I got to know very well, who died only on the 24th of January. And I went to his funeral in in Suffolk. And he was a wonderful man, Jimmy King, who many people who will be listening will have heard of Jimmy King. He was a man he was reared near Crusheen, and he was born in the county Clare Nursery, and then he was sent to Roscrea when it closed. And Jimmy, all his life, tried to find his to connect with his family, and it was quite close to his, I suppose he was about 90 when he made contact with his relatives, his mother's family. He did more or less identify who his father's family was as well, but there was no contact there, or there was no wish to make contact, if you like. And that happens as well. And I've been contacted by people who that has happened to. And although the stories, as I said, I put at the end, tend to be, people who survived and thrived. And they're very important. It's important to know that the human spirit, thanks to no one, often really does do well. If you have that in you, and they did, to go away to make their lives and to thrive. And the three of them, I think what was important to the three stories was the love that they had or they got from their own families.
Which is,
and that's something.
Yeah, and it's great.
They missed out on.
Yeah, exactly, that they missed out on. And it's great to hear, Rita, that these people thrived given, the awful start in life really that they had. And whilst it is obviously anyone who is contacted by someone, it is their right to not want to reconnect. I feel for the people you're talking about, the born in a home like this, who decades later, you want to find out where you're from and who you're from, and to who you are, and to be. To meet that kind of refusal must be just so heartbreaking. Yeah,
it is. And it was disappointing, I think. And, I'll be letting away no secrets when I say that Jimmy, one of the last conversations I had with him is, he always wanted to know exactly what the circumstances were. And whilst I could fill in some of the blanks for him and was able to do that, there were still questions that Jimmy wanted answered, and which unfortunately he never got. I suppose, again, to come back to it though, his daughter Michelle and his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, I met them all at his funeral, and I can honestly say I don't think I ever met a man who was so grieved for. He was so loved by his family, and that was the success, I suppose, of actually having that in his life in later years. But he had huge struggles in his earlier life, which I let Jimmy tell his own story in the book. I just literally typed up his words and let him tell his own story.
Yeah, it is a hugely important book, Forgotten Lives. I'd urge people to check it out, and indeed get along to the Courthouse Gallery in Ennistimon this coming Monday, the 23rd, for the talk on Forgotten Lives, the story of the County Clare Mother and Baby Home, also known as the County Nursery, 1922 to 1932. That's the latest in the lecture series from the North Clare Historical Society. I'd say there's going to be quite a crowd there for that, Rita, and you will be delivering the talk, and you are the author of the book, and really appreciate you joining us on the show this morning, and hope Monday goes very well.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita McCarthy there.